The night air was cold, but the child did not feel the cold. Overwhelmed by exhaustion and confusion, he did not know how he had ended up there. The last clear memory he had was a sweet voice, perhaps his mother's, and a warm light. But now everything was different. He was alone in the midst of the unknown. His small steps left faint traces in the damp ground, traces that disappeared under the weight of fallen leaves. Somewhere in the darkness, a pair of golden eyes glowed, then another, and yet another. From the silence of the forest, from the thick shadows, the wolf's eyes opened, watching him. Something as unusual as a lone child in the forest could not go unnoticed. The wolves noticed him quickly, and their curiosity intertwined with the caution of predators who knew that any anomaly could hide danger. The pack leader, an old and wise wolf named Argus, approached with calculated steps. His silver fur glowed faintly under the moonlight, and his powerful body moved silently through the grass. The other wolves stayed behind, watching the old leader with respect, waiting for his signal. They did not yet understand what this small, vulnerable creature meant. Something that had disturbed the night's silence with its trembling breath and strange, human scent, yet devoid of any threat. The child, sensing the wolf's presence, stopped. His large eyes looked up at the imposing figure approaching him. He did not run. He did not scream. Perhaps he was too tired, or perhaps his little soul felt there was no reason to be afraid. Slowly, without hesitation, he reached out a hand toward Argus, touching his cold muzzle with his small, trembling fingers. A gesture so simple, yet so unexpected. For days on end, the wolves watched over him carefully, not knowing exactly what this lost human cub was. At first, the child was weak, frightened, and helpless, but hunger soon drove him to accept the food the pack offered him. The wolves tore pieces of prey and left them near him, and the child, with trembling hands, began to eat with them, chewing with the same insatiable hunger that consumed the entire pack after a night of hunting. Each day, the pack moved through the forest, and the child, at first unsteady on his feet, struggled to keep up. At first, he often fell, scraping his knees on rough roots or slipping on wet moss. But little by little, he began to learn. He learned to walk more lightly, to hold his breath when necessary, to remain silent when he felt the pack's eyes suddenly rise toward the hidden darkness among the trees. In the early nights, the child slept curled up against the warmth of the wolf's fur, feeling safe for the first time since he had wandered into the forest. The large, strong bodies of his adoptive brothers surrounded him, offering warmth and protection. In his sleep, he breathed rhythmically with them, unconsciously learning to synchronize his heartbeat with theirs. If an unusual sound disturbed the night's quiet, all the wolves raised their heads in unison, their ears pricked, and their bodies tensed. The child quickly learned that when the pack's muscles tightened and their gazes narrowed, danger was near. Weeks passed, then months. The child changed. His fragile body grew stronger, and his movements became more confident. He learned to hide his scent, rubbing himself on the damp ground and tree bark, as the wolves did before hunting. He learned to listen to the sounds of the forest, to distinguish the rustling of the wind from the steps of prey, to recognize the approach of a predator by the way the birds suddenly stopped singing. Argus slowly blinked. The creatures of the forest always looked at him with fear or respect, never with gentleness. No one had ever touched him with such innocence. Something deep in the old wolf's heart stirred, something he had not felt in a long time. A strange warmth, curiosity mixed with a sense of protection. He took a step back but did not growl. He did not run away. He remained there, studying him. The child lowered his hand but made no other move. The other wolves began to move, slowly emerging from the shadows, approaching one by one. Their eyes glowed in the faint light, their muzzles quivered, capturing every fragment of scent. Some growled softly, others came closer, circling the child as if he were prey, but they did not attack. His presence was too strange, too unnatural. Argus felt the pack's eyes on him. As the leader, the decision was his. Chase him away? Ignore him? Consider him an enemy? But this child was none of those things. He was just a lost, defenseless creature, too fragile to be a threat. The wolf raised his head and gave a short, barely perceptible signal. The other wolves stopped, and then, slowly, they dispersed around him, forming a protective circle. The child was under the pack's protection, and so, under a starry sky, in the depths of the forest where the moonlight barely touched the ground, the fate of a child and a pack of wolves was sealed. From that night on, their paths intertwined, and the story that would be written became a legend of the forest, a secret kept by the wind and whispered among the leaves through the centuries. The bear moved slowly among the trees, a massive colossus with long claws and red eyes reflecting the moonlight. It was thin, tormented by hunger, and searching for food. Its thick fur was matted, and saliva dripped from its large teeth. When it entered the clearing, a deep, guttural growl echoed through the night. The child woke suddenly, feeling the trembling of Argus's fur beneath him. He looked up and saw the gigantic creature threatening the pack. Fear gripped him for the first time, but he did not run. Argus rose with pride, his thick mane shining under the moon. He looked the bear in the eyes, and the entire pack felt that the fight was inevitable. The wolves began to growl, positioning themselves strategically around the predator. The bear, unimpressed, raised its muzzle to the sky and let out a roar that shook the forest. Then it attacked. With unexpected speed for its size, the beast struck with a massive paw, tearing chunks of earth and leaves as it passed. Argus leaped aside, avoiding the attack, while two other wolves pounced on the bear, trying to tear through its thick fur. But the bear's long claws repelled them with tremendous force. The wolves quickly got up and attacked again, leaping from different angles. The child, trembling, slowly retreated to the edge of the clearing but could not look away from the fight. For the first time, he saw his pack as true warriors, fighting not only for their territory but also for him. Argus attacked directly, biting deeply into the bear's neck. The beast writhed, twisting furiously, and a piercing scream filled the night. The bear managed to throw Argus to the ground, and for a moment the child thought the old wolf was lost. But Argus did not give up. He quickly rose, limping slightly, and launched a new attack with lethal precision. The other wolves sensed the decisive moment and leaped onto the bear from all sides, biting its legs and back, forcing it to yield. The people of nearby villages whispered about him at night around campfires. They called him the Wolf Boy or the Son of the Forest. Some considered him a sign of nature, a messenger of the forest gods. Others believed him to be a curse, a lost child who belonged to the wild world. Seekers and hunters began to search for him, both out of curiosity and fear. But the forest was vast and full of dangers, and the pack of wolves, led by Argus, an old and wise wolf, was too cunning to be caught. Every time humans approached, the wolves drove them away with threatening growls or made them lose their way in the forest's labyrinths. But one day, the sounds of the forest changed. There were no longer just the wind whistling through the branches or the birds singing in the morning. Now there were hurried footsteps, the rustling of crushed leaves, and human voices filled with concern. The humans had returned, but this time they were more determined, more organized. The child, standing on a high rock from which he could see everything, felt a wave of fear and sadness. He knew something had changed. Argus, who was beside him, raised his muzzle to the sky and let out a long, mournful howl, as if he too felt that the end of an era was approaching. The child looked at his wolves, their bright and gentle eyes, and felt a deep pain in his chest. He understood that he had to make a choice: stay with his wolf family, who had raised and protected him, or return to the humans who were searching for him. Argus approached him and lightly touched him with his muzzle, like a farewell blessing. The other wolves gathered around him, murmuring softly, as if trying to convey a message of love and understanding. In the heart of a deep and mysterious forest, where majestic trees rose toward the sky like ancient columns, hiding the pale light of the moon, lived a pack of 12 magnificent wolves. These were not mere nocturnal predators, but the true lords of this wild land. They moved invisibly among the thick shadows, like forest spirits, with silent steps and relentless gazes, maintaining the balance of the place they called home. The wind blew through the leaves of the trees, whispering ancient stories, and the damp ground was marked by the tracks of those who crossed it, whether beasts, birds, or unknown creatures. One night, with a gentle breeze, while the forest seemed asleep under the slow dance of the leaves, an unusual event was about to disturb the peace of this forgotten corner of the world. The wolves sensed the change before they saw it. A delicate sound, almost imperceptible, disrupted the harmony of the night. The faint rustling of small, trembling steps, lost in the endless expanse of trees and soft moss. The wind carried an unfamiliar scent, not of prey, not of danger, but of something fragile, unusual. A small child, only 3 years old, wandered through the forest. His frail figure moved slowly, barely able to walk among the fallen branches and cold stones, his little body swaying uncertainly with each step. He wore a blue outfit, now dirty with dust and leaves, and his cheeks bore traces of dried tears. His large, deep blue eyes looked with wonder and fear at the darkness surrounding him. He glanced around but recognized nothing. There were no houses, no warm arms to welcome him, only long shadows, gigantic trees, and the mysterious sounds of the forest. The pack taught him to hunt. At first he watched, listened. He saw how the wolves moved invisibly among the shadows, how they coordinated their attacks, how their cold, calculating eyes analyzed every movement of their prey. He learned patience, for in the forest, it was not the hasty who survived, but those who waited for the right moment. At first, he could not run fast enough, but he quickly learned to use the terrain to his advantage. He became a brother to the wolves, a little king of the forest, a child who no longer knew where his human nature ended and the wild soul of the pack began. Every night, when the forest filled with invisible whispers and the dancing shadows of the moon, the child sat beside Argus. The old wolf, the pack leader, seemed to understand him better than anyone else. He raised his muzzle to the sky and sighed silently, and the child watched the moon with him, trying to understand what this wise, silent creature was thinking. It seemed to him that the old wolf was revealing the secrets of the forest, stories of the pack's ancestors, of storms and harsh winters, of great hunts and invisible dangers. The child listened without uttering a word. He knew no words were needed. One cold night, when the wind carried the scent of snow, Argus looked up at the stars, then at the child. In his eyes was an ancient truth, heavy as the earth that so many paws had trodden before him. An unspoken question floated between them. "What are you?" the old wolf's gaze seemed to ask. The child had no answer. He only knew that the forest was now his home, that his blood pulsed to the sound of the wind through the leaves, and that his heart beat in unison with the pack's. He was a man, but he had also become a wolf. But the forest was not without dangers. Though the pack dominated its vast territory, sometimes the deep shadows of the night brought unforeseen threats, silent and ruthless. The cold had descended on the forest like a heavy cloak. The sky was clear, and the moon cast a pale light on the tall trees, whose branches swayed gently in the breeze. The cold air smelled of wet leaves and rain-soaked wood, and somewhere in the distance, owls sang ancient songs, warning the forest creatures of the darkness moving invisibly among the trees. The child slept peacefully, sheltered by Argus's fur, his breathing steady and warm, dreaming of running through the forest with his pack. He was now part of that world, a brother to the wolves, and the dangers of the forest had become his dangers as well. But that night, an intruder had entered the pack's territory. A hungry bear, larger and fiercer than any beast that had dared approach before. At first, only Argus sensed its presence. The old wolf slowly opened his eyes, sniffing the air with perfect precision. A sharp scent of wet fur and hungry flesh reached his nostrils. His yellow eyes glowed in the darkness, and a deep growl rose from his powerful chest, waking the entire pack from their peaceful sleep. The wolves rose one by one, and the clearing where they rested filled with glowing eyes, each wolf sensing the approaching danger. In the end, the beast, wounded and weakened, realized it could not win. It let out a furious growl and retreated, walking heavily into the darkness, leaving behind only the labored breathing of the victorious wolves and the ground torn by claws and fangs. The child slowly approached Argus, who stood still, breathing heavily. His knees gave way, and tears filled his eyes. He crouched beside him, placing his small hand on the old wolf's muzzle, as if offering him some of his warmth. He stayed there all night, silently watching, feeling Argus's labored breathing gradually calm. At dawn, the old wolf slowly rose, limping slightly. He looked at the child with his wise eyes, then approached and, with a gentle gesture, touched his forehead with his cold muzzle. That gesture meant more than any spoken word. The child was no longer just a guest of the pack. He had been accepted. He was one of them.